Thank you for listening to The Lawyer's Daughter. This is Jen Carroll, and this podcast does not have any video. I know I'm on YouTube, but that doesn't matter. I really appreciate you listening to the podcast here. Let's go get started. Hello, friends, and welcome to day 71. There's only 70 more days in this election period. But of course, in America, it's always election time. But there's only 70 more days. We are really jamming. It is August 27th. It's a Tuesday, I believe. And when you aren't working all the time, I'm just doing podcasting and trying to get my life in order since my mom died. I have no concept of time. It's amazing to me, but I do believe it's Tuesday. And I'm a little down today. I posted last night that I had a conversation with very good friends that really bothered me. I didn't expect them. They're from out of town, and I love them. They've known me my whole life, and pretty much my whole life, my whole adult life. And I have great respect for them. And we ended up having lunch, which was delightful. It got me out of the house. That's always good. But in the course of our conversation, and of course it ended up with politics because I was there. If I'm attending something, it's going to end up talking about politics. I think most people know that about me in my close circle of friends, thank God. But I did it intentionally. So look, I'm doing the podcast. Let me get all these thoughts out. Sorry, I've been thinking about this all night. It's just been bugging me. So number one, I try to walk my talk, right? I'm encouraging everybody who's listening to go do hard things. That's me too. So the first hard thing I did, and believe me, it's still hard for me. Big Mouth Jen, it is still hard because this is my town. This is where I live. These are my people, right? So I'm taking risks in my comfort zone. So when I had to wait like an hour for the table. So I got there. They were from out of town. So of course I got there early to wait for the table. And so I'm talking to locals. And one of the women, she was just standing there, and I usually make conversation about architecture or some silly thing. And she was responsive to chatting. She was waiting for her friends as well. And so I said, all right, I really want to ask about the election, but I don't want to upset your day. That's how I said it. And she goes, no, go ahead. And I said, Kamala? And she goes, yes! She's older than me. She's definitely a boomer. And I smiled and I go, okay, good. And then we just started chatting, and she talked about her area of influence and my area of influence. And it was really nice. It was nice to have that kind of confirmation. And I wasn't sure because she was definitely more affluent. I look like I fell out of my trailer is how I look. She's definitely more affluent. She put together like one of those women that, the hair is put together, the makeup, the whole thing. One of those ladies lunch kind of women. And so I wasn't quite sure, but she was great. But then my friends came and we sat down to lunch, and I'm not going to go into a lot of detail because I realized finally I came home and I had to just sit and think. What did I do wrong? Where did I blow it? And why am I so deeply, deeply, deeply disappointed? And I think the disappointment is what got me, at my core, the disappointment that people who I thought were capable of thinking about things in a different way kind of weren't. So what I put together today, and I'll talk about this in the process of talking about today's message, because I thought, here's the deal. We all heard Kamala, we heard Michelle Obama, we heard Tim Walz, we've heard everybody say, meet them where they are. Meet them where they are. If you want to influence, you can't come in hot, and it can't be about you. It has to be about them. Okay, this part I know. It's hard enough to have to there's a word for that, where you have to just really manage your own ego. Humble. That's the word I was thinking. I'm like, you need to humble yourself. And when it comes to campaigns, humility is usually not one of the ingredients. Let's think about it. You can't even do the very nature of campaigning is narcissistic. It fuels on that. You have to believe in yourself. You have to have some narcissistic tendencies to believe you are worthy of providing a service to your constituents. That by its very nature, there is a kind of egocentrism there, right? Narcissism. I think it's a healthy narcissism. And this is why we have people around us who go, get over yourself, because you need people around you to tell you to get over yourself. So when I came to this, all right, stop. let me just go through what I put together here is thinking about, when you want to meet them where they are and your personal ego is involved, you do really have to humble yourself. And that's where I think I made my first error. I'm pretty humble, but with these folks, I knew they were smarty pantses too. So I didn't have to be so humble. I mean, I figured, and frankly, the debate was good. I did love the debate because it was active and free, far ranging, but it was completely a waste of time. And that's what I think, like, that was the waste of time part. So let's get into the content and I'll add some more color as I go along because I have to really check myself. Honestly, that's what I've been doing in the last 24 hours, just checking myself. So we know, and since I posted, by the way, I need to shout out to Violet and to Dawn. There are people out there who have been dealing with this for almost a decade actively in their lives. And I know this, like I intellectually know it, but yesterday I had the pain in my heart knowing it. And you guys have been living with the pain in your heart. And that's just hard. It's hard that we live in a country now where things are so damn polarized. And I know I'm saying everything we know, but I guess it's the first time I touched the third rail and it hurt. So this is an intro. I don't mean to be condescending at all. I know there's real pain out there and y'all have had more experience with this than me, especially those blue dots in a red state. So because the campaign season's heightened emotions and passionate opinions, especially when it comes to elections, sitting down with family members, friends, or close associates, people you know well and with whom you share a deep connection, can often or sometimes turn to conversations that make it perfectly clear that you're not on the same page politically. Now, my first vulnerability is my politics is my values. It's just true. My politics are my values for sure, all the way in. I can't even imagine functioning in a world politically without it deeply, deeply being connected to who I think we are as human beings and who I think we are as citizens of America. So when someone doesn't share that connection at first, for me, it's like, but then you hate me. I take it personally, which is a problem. I'm aware. But it kind of is personal. So, as we know, these discussions can become tense or awkward, whether it's a difference in candidates or an issue or loyalties. And the challenge isn't just voicing your opinions, but navigating the delicate task of influencing. So, folks, I'm so upset about this. I freaking went to Google Scholar, which is where intense nerds hang out, because I'm looking at, I pulled out all the stops, man. I pulled out my thesis writing stops today because I just needed to know if there's some studies out there that will help us learn how to do this. So I have four things I looked at. And confirmation bias came back, which is really interesting when I started digging into this. First is this idea of winning, influencing a loved one isn't about winning an argument or proving someone wrong. It's understanding where they're coming from and what motivates their choices and finding common ground. So this approach is the meet them where they are approach. It's the one that the Democrats want us to use when we go out there, and I get it. So the whole idea of meeting someone where they are requires empathy. And I thought I was doing that. I really did think I was meeting them where they are. It's important to remember that everyone enters an election with an individual frame of reference. Obviously, your life experiences color the glasses you wear in seeing the world. I frankly think this is what makes us amazing. I think humans are amazing because they bring their own frame of reference. So things I never would have thought of because I didn't live through it, someone else has, and they bring that to the party. And it's interesting to me that human nature is to think that everyone's experience is like ours, and yet intellectually we all absolutely positively know that's not true. We know that's not true. And yet yesterday during our discussion, I cannot tell you how many times the evidence used was based on what they perceive to be the way life should be lived based on their experience. Listen to that. They think this is how it should work for everybody else based on their experience. That's going to be a tough one to influence. But the glorious part is everybody brings their own frame of reference to the world, and it's shaped by their personal experiences, their values, the information they've been exposed to, everything we already know. But it's really just important to think about that. So, and my sucker punch was I thought I understood the personal experiences more. Clearly, I have not. Clearly, I have not. So that was a big insight for me. Like I kind of had to bop myself on the head for that one, just like Bunny Frou Frou. Research on political communication underscores the importance of understanding the social context in which someone forms their political views. A woman, Betsy Sinclair, examined how social networks, particularly those in close personal relationships, influence political behavior and attitudes. So, social networks, close personal relationships, political behavior, and attitudes. Those were the three variables. She found that individuals are significantly influenced by the political views of those around them, particularly within their social circles and families. So that's good. When was this study done? I don't have the date right in front of me. This is fairly recent, though. The study highlighted that political discussions within these networks often reinforce existing beliefs, but can also challenge, here we go, here's the upside, can also challenge and reshape opinions when differing viewpoints are respectfully exchanged. This emphasizes the need to approach political discussions with empathy and awareness. Now, this is her looking at the aggregate, right? So you might be like, screw that. It doesn't work in my family at all. And I get it. And a lot of us are trying to influence people older than us. And I got to say, social networks for those older than us already puts even an extra barrier in there because the algorithm is working against us. Remember, whatever they've decided to like and follow, we cannot even begin to deal with that algorithm. But in the meantime, if you engage in a political discussion with someone close to you, recognize that they don't share the same experiences or priorities. For example, a family member might have prioritized economic stability because they faced financial hardship. And you might be more concerned about just social justice. And just to make things complicated, if you very broadly look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, I call it the Farrell meter. When people are at the lower end of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that's just security, food, housing, like the most basic needs. That's the Farrell meter to me. That's how you turn people feral. If you want humans to be violent, if you want them to go crazy, if you want them to be criminals and destruction, all you got to do is make sure their survival is threatened. That's the easiest way. So if they don't have food, they don't have housing, they don't have safety, they're going to be feral. So my point is, though, if you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, your ability to understand someone's reaction to politics would move up the hierarchy of needs just like anything else. So politics for someone who doesn't have their basic needs met is going to be very different from someone who's moved up and is moving towards self-actualization, because those people at the bottom of Maslow's hierarchy of needs is pragmatism. I just have to solve the problem of getting some food, right? Super feral pragmatism. I don't mean feral in a bad way. I mean feral is like, I got to survive. Feral cats are fucking cut you because they know they have to survive. So the point is, if you force humans into this desperation for these basic things, you will make them crazy. And as you relax with security, as you relax and move up Maslow's hierarchy of needs, it means more of your needs are met. So you're able to suddenly start to shift to being more generous. And that's essentially what happens in that pyramid, is as you move from it's all about me to it's all about us. And it's all about me and how I function in a world, all about us. That's how the political arguments will increase in sophistication and what the priorities are. So this is not saying carry around a Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but just really be aware of the people that you're talking to. I happen to be talking to people who are definitely at the, I thought would be at the self-actualization level, but I'm wrong. I was wrong. I just was wrong. Okay. So I guess I need to throw in a Maslow's hierarchy of needs pyramid in here just so y'all can reference it in the blog. So you have the ability to actively listen, acknowledge the concerns, and validate their feelings, meeting them where they are. My pause was for a reason. Listen, acknowledge, and validate. Now you're on common ground. It doesn't mean you agree, but recognizing their perspective can open the door to a more meaningful conversation. My friends, I did that. Probably not very, very well because I'm argumentative when I'm with smarty pantses, but I did actually try to very hard listen to the points. Later, I decided that all the points that they were arguing with me didn't even matter to them. It didn't matter. That's what I got really mad about, is that we spent a lot of time talking about nonsense. It was not that important to them. Some of them were very important to me, but it was not that important to them. And I just didn't get it. I just really didn't get it. Okay, so let's identify what motivates them, their vote. Understanding that motivation is critical for influencing. And this is really the transition, right? I thought I understood because I listened and I validated, but I think this morning I figured out what motivates their vote, but I'm still not sure. So, in order to influence people, the decisions are often layered under. So the reason why they're going to vote the way they vote is often layered under propaganda, spin, confirmation bias, all kinds of other things. We just talked about Betsy Sinclair's study, the people that are around them. All of these things influence them. So you've got to peel back these layers and ask the open-ended questions, encouraging them to reflect on their choices. Like, what's the most important issue for you in this election? Or how do you think the candidates' policies will impact our community? You're trying to get them to reveal their values. So that's the motivation for their vote, right? And what's interesting is I do believe these two people will vote because they have been told to vote their whole lives and they understand the importance of voting. It's one of the things I think we have in common, is that we really believe voting is important. I don't know that I ever got to what motivates their vote. David Nickerson in 2008 did some research that provided some valuable insights into the power of direct interpersonal communication in influencing voter behavior. His hypothesis was that personalized and respectful engagement would significantly impact voter turnout and preference. He did this 2 experiments and found that direct interpersonal communication can be a powerful tool for influencing voter behavior, especially when it involves personalized and respectful engagement. So the key here is this high-touch, person-to-person method is extremely productive when it can be productive. Not saying it was productive in all cases. Voters, the experiment showed that voters were more likely to be swayed by conversations that acknowledged their concerns and respected their perspectives, reinforcing the importance of understanding and addressing the underlying motivations. So sometimes these motivations might be really deeply entrenched and no amount of discussion will change them. And in most cases, it's crucial to recognize when you've reached a point, well, this won't work. And here's why. Knowing when to move on is important. And that's kind of what I figured out yesterday in real time as I was sitting there just feeling ickier and ickier. I'm using the word icky because I don't believe that's a medical diagnosis, but it's actually super relatable. So I'm hoping y'all know what icky feels like. So how do you know when to move on? If you're dealing with someone whose position is rigid and unlikely to change, it's often best to agree to disagree. And frankly, that's what one of the people yesterday said over and over. Agree to disagree, agree to disagree, agree to disagree. Super weird. Like it felt like such a, it's a mighty way to make somebody else feel shut down. So I don't know that I'd ever say agree to disagree because it's kind of condescending and it doesn't feel good. But you can say it in your head. And that's what I'm suggesting. Just, you have only so much energy. And you have only so much enthusiasm. Take it from me. I learned that yesterday as I sat last night and just kind of settled into Rachel and some crocheting and thought, I just need to chill right now. You will know, I don't want you wasting your time on people that aren't going to change their minds. You don't want to waste your time. That's why my friends are sad, because their families, it's a waste of time to try to convince their families. And I feel really bad because the 2 women I mentioned at the top, Violet and Dawn, are amazing, amazing humans. I just didn't know the pain they were going through. I knew Dawn's a little bit. I just didn't realize the pain they've been going through. So, know when to move on. You can obviously shift the conversation. I did that many times yesterday, of course, because I was just like, I'm dying here. And then signs that but here's some of the signs. You're dealing with a rigid person. Repeated statements of belief without opening consideration of the alternative. So this happened a lot. There was just these repeated statements, and my challenge was that the statements were based on garbage. So I realized I was arguing against Fox talking points. And at that point, there's nothing I can do because they're literally saying them like we've all read them. They're just verbatim. Like, here's just my best one. This is the one I can't get over because it was on fire this morning on Twitter for some other reason. Trump never called military people suckers and losers. And I said, all right, okay, that didn't happen. He certainly disrespected John McCain. And they both had to just look at me because he did. He hates John McCain. So, and I don't even want to have arguments about that because I don't care who he likes and doesn't. I don't even care about that. That's like not important at all. That's when I knew we were in trouble because we're talking about things that don't matter to either of us. Like whether Trump hates the military. It's not going to affect their vote. It's not going to affect mine. I already know I'm voting for such different reasons. And that's how I knew I was already in trouble. So Brem, I'm sure I just butchered their names, provided insight into why pushing too hard in discussion can be counterproductive. And this is so funny because I can't believe they had to study this, but it's good that they studied it so that we can confirm that it really happens with human behavior. And I love studies of human behavior. The researchers hypothesized that when individuals perceive their freedom to choose or express an opinion is being threatened, this is really important. Listen to that. When they perceive their freedom to choose or to express an opinion, they experience a psychological response that makes them more resistant to change. I'm sorry. As defined by the boomer generation. I'm sorry. It's just like, is that not the definition of a boomer? But the thing is, it cracks me up because I grew up with boomers ahead of me my whole life. I watched those suckers. They changed their minds all the damn time. And you know what else? They used to be free love, hippie loving, have a good time, let's go, everybody, one for all for one. And I don't know what the hell happened. As soon as they got some for themselves, they just locked it down, including my friends. Anyway, pushing too hard to change someone's mind can lead to reactance, or a reaction in the non-academic world, where a person becomes even more resistant to change. And this, of course, underscores the importance of recognizing when to back off and avoid triggering a counterproductive defensive response. Now, as we all know, moving on doesn't mean giving up. It just means respecting the relationship enough not to let the politics create a rift, if that's possible. For me, I'm going to do my best here. Sometimes, of course, the best action is to preserve the relationship and focus on the areas where you agree, if that's possible. I'll just keep saying that, if that's possible. When I was sitting on my couch yesterday, really trying to think through everything and what happened, one of the things I thought about a lot is how my own self-awareness was not as good as it should have been. I think standing there for an hour waiting for a table, because they came, they had to drive here and everything. So that was my role. I had kind of checked out, like you just stand there and you're kind of not thinking. I wasn't really ready for the discussion in terms of my own self-awareness, checking in with myself. So it's really important that your energy, your mindset, and your biases that can affect how these conversations unfold, that you have them in check. And one of the things I did yesterday, which you're going to chuckle that this is a problem for me, but I came in a little hot. I am such a cheerleader. It's frightening how, and part of it's because I live at home and I'm an extrovert, and so I'm alone all the time. Yeah, like I said, I will talk a customer service agent's ear off. But I came in hot. I did. I was excited. Smart people were coming to lunch with me. Like, I was just so excited for this, fired up. And I'd had success talking to people in the parking lot. So I was feeling pretty righteous. Let's just accept that. And I guess I didn't know how hard they would go at all. But I knew there was a difference of opinion. I was prepared for that. I guess I didn't know how hard it was. So my energy was too high. It was definitely too high. They were very low energy. I wasn't. I my brain goes really fast in that kind of situation where if somebody throws something out there, I know the argument, and I should have been less argumentative. Just because they were saying things that I knew were false, who cares? That's not what they cared about. But see, it took me till getting home to understand that's what they don't even care about the things that they used as evidence. That's one of the things I think is so difficult. Like there was a whole discussion about whether or not gas stoves should be sold. I'm going to tell you, and I did stop at this point and I said, guys, honestly, whether or not you can buy a gas stove, is that really going to affect your quality of life? I mean, I love my Gen Air. It's gas. The knobs stick. I've practically been gas poisoned by my gas stove. And I still love my Gen Air. But would it change my life? Nah, it just wouldn't. And that's why I'm like, what are we even arguing about? This is ridiculous. These are not issues. This is just grievances. These are just whiny little bitch things. And there's no time this is my point of view, right? There's no time right now to be a whiny little bitch. There's just none. But that's me. And I should shut up because I was trying to influence them, not be self-righteous and not be a smarty pants about what I care about. So I really choked. I effed up bad. And so that's why I wrote this blog, this content today, because I'm like, cannot be the only one, and I really need to just analyze my own behavior. Anyway, the Lord, Ross, and Lepper, say that 3 times fast, did a study where they hypothesized that individuals tend to assimilate information. This is really important because this is going to tie in with our confirmation bias. Individuals tend to assimilate information to reinforce their pre-existing beliefs. So imagine let me keep going and then I'll come in and give you the example. A phenomenon known as biased assimilation found that being aware of one's biases and cognitive filters can help engage more constructively in discussions with those who hold opposing views. Listen to that. Being aware of my biases and my cognitive filters can help me engage more effectively. Self-awareness can mitigate the negative effects of bias assimilation. So, allowing more open and effective communication. Now, this is really cool. This is a way to use their self-awareness to help them. So, sorry, I got to think of an example. I don't have the example for this, but if my self-awareness. So, Jen's self-awareness is she will always rush to support the little guy. That's just a priority in my mind. Like there was a whole talk about transgender yesterday and I got so upset because I just sat there listening to 2 people tell me they want to make decisions for transgender kids. And I'm like, you don't have a horse in this race. You have 0 horses in the transgender race. It is irrelevant to you. Literally means nothing. And the examples they were using were anecdotal from their past. Here's a good one. And I couldn't believe this was coming out of their mouths. When I grew up, there were no transgender people. Okay. That to me is so fake. I don't even know how to deal with it. That's just a fallacy. How could you conclude that there were none because of your limited range of knowledge? That's just a reflexive, that is a circular reference in an Excel spreadsheet. A equals A because A equals A. You got nothing new coming in there. Because you didn't know any, it doesn't exist. Can't deal with that. But if I look at my own bias, which is I protect, then I can calm down and not rise, because I rose, man. I rose hard. Not rise to protect, but instead be quiet and listen. Because then I could deal with, so you're making a decision based on your limited point of view? That's a better question. Don't you see that? Or based on I wouldn't even say limited because that's a judgment word, right? So you're coming to a conclusion based on your frame of reference. There you go. That's just a nice active listening reframing, right? So the reason you've come to this conclusion is based on your frame of reference. Correct. Would you change your decision if we were to increase your frame of reference? Turns out, on that one issue, they would. which surprised me. Not a lot, but I do believe it's in their brains now. I changed the point of view of my personal experience being the only place that they were referring to get data. So there is a chance. But let's talk about this biased assimilation, because this is really important. And I think it's interesting to look at it juxtaposed to confirmation bias, which we talked about in an earlier podcast. The confirmation bias is based on selection, the kind of information you choose to hear. So confirmation bias says, I'm going to watch Fox because they're going to say things. It's confirmation bias is, I'm going to watch MSNBC. I absolutely know that's some confirmation bias. And in fact, when MSNBC started to not be a confirmation bias channel, a bunch of us, me included, got pissed. Really pissed. Because there is some soothing that comes from confirmation bias. And frankly, some of the things that they were doing were kind of wacky. So there's confirmation bias. But biased assimilation is how it's interpreted. So you're going to go to the store, Fox News or MSNBC, where you know you can get the kinds of things you like. There's your confirmation bias. They have the kinds of things I like to hear. But my biased assimilation, once I'm in the store, once I'm in Fox News or MSNBC, what I choose to learn is based on biased assimilation, meaning it is easier for me to file that information away because I already have a way to assimilate it. And here's the deal. Biased assimilation is a tendency to interpret ambiguous or mixed evidence in a way that aligns with my existing beliefs. So I always think of assimilation as file drawers in your brain. There's just tons of file drawers. This works for old people. I don't know if this would work for my daughter. She doesn't even know what a library card catalog was. My daughter never saw a library card catalog, you guys. That is hard for me. Anyway, especially because I'm over here doing old school research with new school tools. But so you have file folders in your file cabinets in your brain. And when a new piece of information comes along, it's easier for you to learn it if you have a folder already for that information. So this is a key for teaching. If you really want your kids to learn a new habit, or your coworker or whatever, you have got to put it with information they already have. You've got to hook it onto something. You've got to find its file folder. And so forever you're trying to find a way to hook some new information onto something that already has a place for it to go. The problem with biased assimilation is that they're not really giving you facts. They're not really giving you enough information to be able to accurately and critically evaluate what's coming in. But because you have a folder for it and a file drawer for it, you decide, you do the rest of the work. You're biased in how you assimilate that information and put it in your file drawers. This is what's happening for a lot of people. Everyone. So I have this in a table. It'll be in the blog. Take a look at it. But it's really interesting to watch how these kinds of learning and biases and how humans have a way of trying to make information work for us. Like we can't just take on new stuff all the time. It has to work for us or we'd be overwhelmed. Well, confirmation bias and biased assimilation are two super, super powerful things that are going on that thwart free thinking and changing your mind. They are in the way of changing your mind. So you got to keep your head up when going gets tough. I tried so hard last night to lift myself out of this dark place. Let me tell you the rest of the story though, because this is the part where I'm trying to focus on in terms of lifting my head up. When we were done having lunch, and they bought me lunch, which was really kind and appreciated, and it was good food and everything, I ran into the restaurant real quick. We were sitting outside because I'm anti-COVID, right? So we're sitting outside, and I ran into the restaurant real quick to try to find the woman that was sitting behind us because, yeah, I have a good outside voice. I was a little bit loud, and I was watching all the time to make sure I wasn't disturbing anybody because, I don't want to be obnoxious. But I went in to find the woman that was sitting behind us, and the whole wait staff came up to me and said, "Oh my God, you are fire!" Which cracked me up. So apparently I did well with the with the millennials and the Gen Zs that were inside the place that they had been walking back and forth. And one woman in particular, one waitress, kept going, "I hope you know I'm eavesdropping," which is funny. That cracked me up. And she came right up to me. Turned out she's doing legal studies. And I said, "Oh my God, I'm the lawyer's daughter, and got a big court case in the past, and now I'm trying to look at the election." And she got so excited, took down all the information. I hope she's listening. It was great. I mean, that really made me feel good. Is that people were listening, and I mean that I was able to, I don't know, model some behavior. My fairest one was my fairest one. The funnest one was when it started to get on this kick of equal access. Oh, affirmative action. That was one of the things that came up. "Do you think affirmative action is good?" And I said, "Yeah, I do actually." "Well, why? It's not fair." And I go, "Well, let me see." And I did the thing. You know the difference between equal and equity. And so I did the physical example, and I told my friend to stand up. She's very tall, and I said, "Can you reach the top of the window?" And she said, "Yeah." And I go, "Can I reach the top of the window?" And I stood up, and all 5 feet of me trying. And she's like, "No." And I go, "Right." I go, "That's not fair." And she goes, "Wait, what do you mean?" I go, "Well, I can't reach. It's not fair." And I said, "But if we're talking about equal, we're not equal. But if we want to talk about equity, what could help me reach the top of the windowsill?" And they're looking at me, and I said, "A stool." And now there's equity. There's my fair shot at reaching the top of the windowsill just like you. Because I was born short, you were born tall. But we both have the same chance of getting to the top of the windowsill if I can have a stool. And it didn't change me. I'm still me. I'm not any different. But it took into account my circumstances. And it made it so that I had also a chance at reaching the top of the windowsill. Anyway, people know that experiment. People know that lecture because my daughter told me she knows that lecture. I didn't know it. I had only heard it once, and I know that it's done much better than what I much better. But it's such a good example because you can get people to actually move their bodies, which also helps changing their minds. Anytime you can engage other senses in this discussion, it's good. We know because when you touch merchandise, you're much more likely to buy it. Just saying, there's ways to use our senses to also influence. Maybe I should do a podcast on that. So that's my story. Been a weird 24 hours, but I have to own my own crap. And I want to hear more stories. If you have a story, tell me on Facebook or tell me on Twitter or tell me on Threads. I want to know. I think this is really interesting to me, and it's devastating and it's painful. And I almost forgot. I do think I figured out what might matter in this election. I think if other people found out how they're voting, they would be mortified. I'm not going to go at it like that, but I do think that it's interesting to look at the role of ego in how people also pursue these kinds of things. I do have ego tied up with Kamala Harris in that I totally support her. I think this is great. I'm fired up. These are the values I live for. I just started to prep the stuff on what we're going to talk about on issues. Man, I just get fired up because the way the Democratic Party's coming after these issues, it's time for a change. It was really hard. My friends are very pro law and order. We don't believe in defund the police. And I said, all right, I don't necessarily believe in defund the police either. But I do believe in changing the way we're policing. I think our policing has become insane. It used to be that police walked around without guns and they were solving problems. They were helping the community run better. They were taking care of nuisances, and then also they took care of the bad guys. That's what they did. But their whole point of view was not get the bad guys. Their whole point of view was, how are we going to make my community better today? Like they left the office thinking, how am I going to make my community better today? And they had relationships with people in the community, and you knew who they were, and you could hold them accountable because they also came to the Little League game and your friends' things. But now we've siloed everybody. Police are siloed. They're over there in the MAGA group. Not all of them, but it feels like that. Anyway, I think that's one of the reasons I love the new Democratic platform is that a lot of the things that we're looking at are not to get rid of things, but to start to adapt them to a 21st century society with new technology, with new needs, with new problems. And I'm down for that. That sounds exciting. So, but I do think There's no way these two would own their position publicly. I just don't think they would. I don't think they'd put a sign up in the yard at all. So that's interesting to me. Again, I'm leaving it alone. Third rail, not going near it. I don't think they're going to change their mind. That's not my job. I tried. But I did have a lot of self-awareness, and I did learn a lot about me in the last 24 hours and how I'm coming to the party. And I hope this helps you. Thank you. Thank you for being my therapist today. I appreciate it. I know I'm not alone, and I look forward to us getting again together tomorrow. Thank you for listening to today's podcast. Make sure you subscribe and rate, and I'll be back with another episode really soon.